Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 12. Nicole. My boss called me worthless in front of our agency's largest client. 34 people in that conference room. Every single one of them watching as Marcus Whitfield, our division head, told the CMO of a Fortune 500 company that I was the problem with their account. 10 weeks later, that same CMO followed me to my new firm. So did 11 other clients. Marcus lost 62% of his division's revenue in a single quarter. Here's what happened. I'd spent 7 years at Caldwell Partners, a mid-size PR and communications firm in Murray Hill. We occupied the 27th floor of a glass tower on Park Avenue. Impressive packaging for what had become, under Marcus Whitfield's leadership, a deeply toxic workplace. I started as a junior account coordinator and worked my way up to client relations director. That title meant I was the primary relationship manager for our top-tier accounts, the ones that kept the lights on. I didn't just manage campaigns. I managed expectations, egos, and the delicate dance between creative vision and corporate reality. Marcus had been division head for 3 years when the incident happened. He came from a competing agency with a reputation for shaking things up. What that actually meant was that he believed fear was the most effective management tool. He had a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, and he used it like a stage. You could see him pacing behind the glass during phone calls, gesturing dramatically, performing power for anyone who happened to walk by. The thing about Marcus was that he needed an enemy. Every quarter, he picked someone to blame for whatever wasn't going perfectly. Do you know someone like that? Someone who sees everyone's mistakes but their own? Last year, Marcus publicly blamed the creative director for coasting until she resigned. Before that, it was a senior strategist who he claimed was too soft with clients. The pattern was always the same: public humiliation, isolation from key projects, and then a mutual decision to part ways. I watched 3 talented people leave that way. I told myself I was different. I had client relationships he couldn't touch. I had 7 years of institutional knowledge. I had made myself, I thought, irreplaceable. I was about to learn that to Marcus. Everyone was replaceable. That was the point. The fear of replacement was how he controlled us. The first sign of trouble emerged in January when Marcus began adding himself to my client emails. Not all of them, just the ones with our biggest account, Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Meridian was a $4.2 million annual contract, and I had personally managed their communications strategy for 5 years. Their CMO, Patricia Huang, was practically a friend. When she came to town, we would meet for coffee. It was enjoyable to chat with her. She sent me a card when my mother fell ill. When I asked Marcus about the email monitoring, he smiled that performative smile of his. Just staying informed, Nicole, leadership visibility. But I noticed he never CC'd himself on anyone else's client communications. Professional boundaries, I reminded myself. Document everything. So I did. I set up a private Notion workspace, not the company server, and started saving copies of every email, every meeting note, every performance review. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I just knew that in Marcus's world, evidence was the only currency that mattered. February brought the first direct confrontation. Marcus called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon, closed the door, and told me he had concerns about my client management style. Patricia Huang mentioned that you two grab coffee sometimes, he said, leaning back in his chair. That's not appropriate, Nicole. We need professional boundaries with clients. I stared at him. Patricia and I have worked together for 5 years. Building personal relationships is part of maintaining long-term accounts. You need something that sets you apart from everyone else. Of course, my relationship with Patricia couldn't be summarized that easily, but I had to somehow explain my approach to clients to Marcus. All my efforts were in vain. I'm not asking for your opinion. His voice went flat. I'm telling you how things are going to work from now on. All client communications go through me first. All meetings include me or someone from my direct team. Clear? It wasn't clear. It was sabotage dressed up as supervision. But I nodded, said understood, and walked out of his office with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. That night, I updated my documentation folder. I typed out everything Marcus had said, word for word, while it was fresh. I noted the date, time, and the fact that no HR representative had been present. I noted that no other client relations director in the company was subject to these restrictions. I also noted something else. Marcus hadn't put any of this in writing. Everything was verbal. He was smart enough to know that emails could be forwarded, but he wasn't smart enough to realize that I was keeping records anyway. March was when things escalated. Marcus announced a restructuring of client responsibilities. Suddenly, I wasn't the sole point of contact for Meridian anymore. Guess who he assigned as co-lead on the account? A junior account manager named Derek, someone with just 18 months of experience. Fresh perspective, Marcus explained at the team meeting. Nicole's been on Meridian so long, she might be missing opportunities for innovation. Derek looked uncomfortable. He should have. He was being used as a weapon, and everyone in that room knew it. I pulled Derek aside after the meeting. "This isn't about you," I told him, "but you should know what you're walking into." He nodded, his face pale. "I know, I've seen what happened to the others." "Document everything," I said. Emails, meetings, verbal instructions, everything. It was the same advice I'd given myself. It was starting to feel like survival protocol. The Monday morning all-hands in April was when Marcus crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed. Patricia Huang happened to be in town that week, and Marcus had insisted she attend. Transparency with our key clients, he called it. She sat along the wall as an observer. The meeting started normally. Then Marcus pulled up a slide I'd never seen before. "Let's talk about the Meridian account," he said, and something cold settled in my chest. The slide showed a graph of client satisfaction scores. Meridian's had dipped slightly over the past quarter, from 94% to 91%. Still excellent by any industry standard. Still well above our targets, but Marcus presented it like a crisis. "This decline," he said, gesturing at the 3 percentage point drop, "represents a failure of relationship management, and I think we all know where that responsibility lies." He turned to look directly at me, 34 people in that room, every single one of them following his gaze. I watched in disbelief as 34 pairs of eyes turned on me one by one. Honestly, it was like a nightmare. "Nicole, do you want to explain to Patricia why her satisfaction scores are dropping?" I felt the heat crawl up my neck, but I kept my voice steady. "A 3-point fluctuation is within normal variance, Marcus, and if you look at the qualitative feedback, I'm not asking about qualitative feedback." He cut me off, his voice sharp. "I'm asking why you've let this account slide while you're busy having coffee dates with the client instead of doing your job." The room went silent. I could feel everyone holding their breath. Patricia Huang stood up. "Marcus, I need to interject here." "Patricia, please." Marcus held up a hand. "This is an internal performance discussion." "No." Patricia's voice was ice. "You just accused your employee of mismanaging my account. In front of me. That makes it my business." Turning toward the conference room, she said, "To be perfectly clear, the reason Meridian has been working with Caldwell Partners for 5 years is Nicole Dawson." The coffee meetings Marcus mockingly referred to were strategic meetings, where Nicole and I agreed on messages that brought over $200 million in positive publicity to our company. If there is a problem with the management of this account, it began the day someone decided to micromanage a relationship they didn't understand. She picked up her bag. "I'll be in touch about next steps." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Marcus's face had gone a strange color, something between red and gray. He looked at me with pure hatred. "We'll discuss this later," he said, and moved on to the next slide as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. 34 witnesses had just watched the division head publicly humiliate an employee and get corrected by the client he was supposedly protecting. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone felt it. The 34 pairs of eyes that had been looking at me accusingly were now looking at the ground. I went back to my desk and added the entire incident to my documentation folder. Every word I could remember, every reaction I'd observed. The date, the time, the names of everyone present. Then I opened my personal email and drafted a message to myself with the subject line, April 14th. Hostile work environment incident. That's when I understood something important. Marcus wasn't going to stop. What happened in that meeting had embarrassed him, and embarrassment made him dangerous. He would retaliate. It was just a question of how. I didn't have to wait long for the answer. 2 days after the all-hands meeting, HR requested a meeting with me. The email came from Sandra Chen, our head of human resources, and it was carefully worded in that way HR communications always are, friendly on the surface, threatening underneath. You know those formal letters, right? Just a quick chat about team dynamics and communication styles, the calendar invite said. I walked into Sandra's office knowing exactly what this was. Marcus had complained about me. The question was what he'd said. "Nicole, thanks for coming in." Sandra gestured to the chair across from her desk. She had a folder open in front of her, my personnel file, I assumed. I wanted to touch base about the Meridian situation. What situation would that be? Sandra's smile tightened slightly. Marcus mentioned there was some tension at Monday's meeting. He's concerned about maintaining professional boundaries with clients. There it was. Professional boundaries. The same phrase he'd used in February. He was building a narrative. Sandra, with respect, the tension at Monday's meeting came from Marcus publicly criticizing my work in front of our largest client. That client then defended me. If anyone should be discussing professional boundaries, it's Marcus, who chose to air internal performance concerns in front of a customer. Sandra's pen paused over her notepad. Marcus characterized it differently. I'm sure he did. I leaned forward. Sandra, I want to file a formal complaint. What happened in that meeting was targeted harassment. It's part of a pattern that's been escalating since January. The shift in Sandra's expression was subtle but unmistakable. She'd expected me to be defensive. She hadn't expected me to go on offense. A formal complaint is a serious step, Nicole. What Marcus did was serious. I pulled out my phone and opened my Notion app. I have contemporaneous notes from every incident since February. Emails he sent contradicting his verbal instructions. A pattern of isolating me from my accounts while claiming it's about fresh perspective. 34 witnesses to what happened on Monday. Sandra stared at my phone like it might bite her. You've been documenting this? She seemed very surprised. Of course I have, wouldn't you? The meeting ended with Sandra promising to look into it and taking some notes. I knew what that meant. She would talk to Marcus. Marcus would deny everything. It would become he said, she said, but I had planted a flag. There was now an official record that I had raised concerns before anything worse happened. 2 weeks later, something worse happened. I came into the office on a Friday morning to find Derek sitting at my desk. Not near my desk, at it, using my computer. Derek, I stopped in the doorway. What's going on? He jumped up like he'd been caught stealing. Nicole, Marcus told me to. He said you were transitioning off some accounts and I should start getting familiar with the files. What accounts? Derek's face told me everything I needed to know before he said it. Meridian, and Thornfield and the Castellano group. Meridian, Thornfield, Castellano, my 3 largest accounts. 60% of my portfolio, 60% of my value to this company. When did Marcus tell you this? Yesterday afternoon, after you left for the day. After I left, of course, no witnesses, no paper trail, just verbal instructions to a junior employee who was too scared to push back. I walked past Derek to Marcus's office. His assistant tried to stop me. He's on a call. I opened the door anyway. Marcus looked up from his desk, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, wait, with that smug expression that said he knew exactly what this was about. I didn't wait. You're removing me from my accounts? He covered the phone's mouthpiece. We'll discuss this later, Nicole. No, we'll discuss it now. I could feel my heart pounding, but my voice came out steady. If you're restructuring my role, I need that in writing, per company policy. Remember this. You need documentation to prove anything, and words that aren't recorded are not documentation. Something flickered in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to know the policy. Most employees didn't. I'll send you an email, he said finally. Today. I walked out of his office and went straight to my desk, my actual desk, which Derek had vacated, and started forwarding every client contact, every project timeline, every piece of institutional knowledge to my personal email, not to steal anything, just to ensure I had records of my own work. The email from Marcus arrived at 4:47 p.m. It was remarkable in its careful vagueness. Effective immediately, account responsibilities for Meridian Pharmaceuticals, Thornfield Properties, and Castellano Group will be transitioned to Derek Reyes under my direct supervision. Nicole Dawson will focus on new business development during this transition period. New business development. In PR terms, that meant cold calling. It was a demotion without the official title change, a way to humiliate me into quitting so they wouldn't have to fire me and risk a lawsuit. I saved the email. I printed it. I added it to my documentation folder. Then I called Patricia Huang. "I need to tell you something," I said when she answered, "and I need you to hear it from me first." I told her everything: the harassment, the documentation, the account transition. I told her that I wasn't sure how much longer I'd be at Caldwell Partners, and that I wanted her to know the truth before Marcus had a chance to spin it. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "Nicole, I've been at Meridian for 22 years. I've seen a lot of talented people get pushed out by insecure managers. It never ends well for the company that lets it happen." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Meridian's contract with Caldwell Partners is up for renewal in 8 weeks. And I'm saying, if you happen to land somewhere else before then, I'd be very interested in continuing our working relationship." I stared at the wall of my tiny apartment, phone pressed to my ear, understanding what she was offering. "Patricia, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling." Her voice was firm. "You've earned my loyalty, Nicole. Marcus hasn't. It's that simple." After hanging up the phone, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about loyalty. I thought about the 7 years I'd given to Caldwell Partners. I thought about how I'd maintained professional boundaries, even when Marcus crossed every one of his own. I thought about the documentation folder that had started as self-protection and was now looking more and more like a weapon. My mind was exhausted. The next Monday, I started looking for a new job. I didn't do it secretly. I didn't hide my LinkedIn updates or take mysterious personal days. I updated my profile with the headline "Open to Opportunities" and let the industry see. In PR, word travels fast. Within a week, 3 competing agencies had reached out. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He called me into his office with that same smug expression, the one that said he thought he was about to deliver a killing blow. "I hear you're interviewing," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I am. That's disappointing, Nicole. After everything the company has invested in your development." I almost laughed. "Marcus, you just took away 60% of my accounts and put me on cold calling duty. What exactly did you think would happen?" His jaw tightened. "Your performance has been declining. The restructuring was necessary." "My performance was exemplary until you decided to make me a target. I don't know how well I managed, but I tried to keep my voice calm. I have the documentation to prove it. 7 years of stellar reviews. Client retention rates above industry average. A formal complaint filed with HR about your behavior." That confident attitude of his suddenly changed. The color drained from his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, if you try to interfere with my job search, if you give me a bad reference, if you try to damage my reputation in the industry, I will take everything I have to a lawyer, and then to the press." I stood up before he could respond. "Have a nice day, Marcus." As I left the office, I felt lighter than I had in months, not because I had won, because I no longer believed I could win this fight without leaving the system behind. The system was designed to protect people like Marcus. The only way to defeat it was to leave the system and take everything of value with me. The offer came from Sterling Communications 3 weeks later. They were a boutique agency with a reputation for treating employees like actual humans. Smaller than Caldwell, but growing fast. The managing partner, a woman named Jennifer Auchaffer, had heard about my situation through the industry grapevine. "We don't tolerate what you've been through," she told me during the final interview, "and we'd love to have you." The title was Vice President of Client Services, a step up with 15% higher salary, but the real sweetener was the lack of a non-compete clause. Sterling didn't believe in restricting their employees' relationships. Your clients chose you, Jennifer said. If they want to follow you, that's their decision. We won't stop it and we won't force it. We just want to give you a place where you can do your best work. I signed the offer letter on a Friday. I submitted my resignation to Caldwell Partners the following Monday. The resignation letter was one paragraph, professional, dignified. It gave the standard 2 weeks' notice and thanked the company for the opportunity. I didn't mention Marcus by name. I didn't need to. Marcus called me into his office within the hour. "You're making a mistake," he said. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the armrest of his chair. "I don't know what you're hoping to find there, but Sterling is a small shop. They can't offer you what we can. You'll realize soon enough that you made a mistake and start missing this place." "They've offered me respect," I said. "That's more than I've gotten here in the past 6 months. That's exactly what I'm hoping to find, Marcus, respect." "Don't be dramatic, Nicole." "I'm not exaggerating. I'm being specific." I pulled a file out of my bag, copies of my documents. "I have reports from all the meetings where you belittled me. I have all the emails that contradict your own verbal instructions. I have all the incidents where you criticized me but ignored the same behavior in others. I have 34 witness statements from the General Assembly meeting held in April." Marcus's face went still. "What do you want?" "I want a clean exit. No bad references, no industry gossip. You let me leave quietly and this folder stays closed." "That sounds like a threat." "It's not a threat, it's a boundary." I stood up. "I've learned that professional boundaries only work if you're willing to enforce them." He didn't say another word. I walked out of his office for the last time. The 2 weeks of notice passed in a blur. I handed off my remaining accounts, the scraps Marcus had left me, to Derek, who looked both relieved and guilty. I cleaned out my desk. I said goodbye to the colleagues who had become friends, and I made phone calls. Not to poach clients. Let me be clear about this. I never told anyone they had to leave Caldwell Partners. What I did was much simpler. I told them the truth. I told them I was leaving, why I was leaving, and where I was going. I told them the door was open if they wanted to continue working with me. Patricia Huang was the first to walk through it. "We're not renewing with Caldwell," she told me 3 days before my last day. "I've already informed their contracts team." "Patricia, you don't have to." "Stop." Her voice was warm but firm. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Meridian. You're the best in the business at what you do, and I'm not going to let some insecure manager take that away from us." She paused. "Also, I've spoken with the CMOs at Thornfield and Castellano. They're interested in hearing your pitch." By my last day at Caldwell Partners, 3 more clients had signaled their intent to follow me to Sterling. By the end of my first month at my new job, that number had grown to 8. By the end of the quarter, it was 11. 11 clients, representing $12.8 million in annual billings. Marcus had pushed me out to protect his ego. In doing so, he had handed me the keys to his kingdom. The emails started arriving about 6 weeks after I left, former colleagues reaching out, asking about opportunities at Sterling. Derek was the first. The junior account manager Marcus had used as a pawn against me. "I can't do it anymore," he told me over coffee. "After you left, he needed a new target. Guess who got picked?" I made a call to Jennifer. Derek started at Sterling 2 weeks later. Then came Maria, a senior strategist who'd been with Caldwell for 12 years. Then James, a creative director. Then 4 more account managers, all in the span of 2 months. They were reaching out to me. Word had spread that Sterling was the place to go if you wanted to escape toxic management. The team exodus wasn't revenge, it was natural selection, but Marcus didn't see it that way. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after I'd left. My assistant buzzed me. "Nicole, there's a Marcus Whitfield on line 1. He says it's urgent." I took a breath, then I picked up. "Marcus, you're poaching my people." His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "That's a violation of your non-compete." "I don't have a non-compete, I never signed one." Silence. I checked before leaving. I continued. "Caldwell's standard employment contract has no non-compete or hiring clause. It's one of the sales pitches the HR department uses for recruitment. They call it an employee-friendly policy." I paused for a moment. Sometimes things turn out really funny. This isn't over, Nicole. Actually, Marcus, it's all over. I tried to keep my voice calm and professional. You lost because you didn't understand the difference between managing people and controlling them. Everyone who left Caldwell after I left told me the same thing. They were tired of working in fear. That's not my fault. That's your fault. I hung up. The final chapter of Marcus Whitfield's career at Caldwell Partners began with a board meeting in June. I wasn't there, obviously, but I heard about it from 3 different sources within 24 hours. In the PR industry, news like this travels at the speed of Schadenfreude. The board had called Marcus in to present the quarterly numbers. His division had lost 62% of its revenue since April. 11 major clients had left. 7 key employees had departed. The pipeline had stalled because the relationship managers had left, and those who remained were too demoralized to rebuild. Marcus tried his usual strategy: blame. He pointed fingers at the economy, at the industry, at me personally. He called me vindictive. He called the departing employees disloyal. He called the clients who left ungrateful. The board wasn't buying it. "Let me understand this," said one board member. "I heard this quote from 2 separate sources, so I'm confident it's accurate. You're saying your most senior client manager resigned, took 11 major accounts with her, then 7 of your best employees followed, and none of this is your fault." Marcus apparently started talking about how I had poisoned the well, about how I had manipulated people into leaving, about how I was conducting a coordinated campaign against him. "Did she have a non-compete?" the board member asked. "Well, no, but did she have a non-solicitation agreement?" "The company doesn't use those, but..." "So she left legally. The clients chose to follow her legally. The employees chose to resign legally." The board member leaned forward. "What exactly is your complaint, Marcus? That people prefer working with her over working for you?" The meeting ended with Marcus being placed on a performance improvement plan. 3 weeks later, he resigned. The official announcement cited personal reasons and new opportunities. But everyone in the industry knew what it really meant. He had been pushed out. Just like he'd pushed out so many others before me, I found out about his resignation from Sandra Chen. She sent me a LinkedIn message. "Thought you'd want to know. Marcus's last day was yesterday. The board brought in someone from outside. They're implementing new management training requirements." I wrote back, "Thank you for listening when it mattered." Because she had. She documented my complaint, created an official record. When the board started asking questions, that record was part of the answer. The industry moves fast. Within 6 months, Marcus Whitfield's name had become a cautionary tale. The manager who drove away his best people through hostility and ego then blamed everyone but himself when the consequences arrived. I saw him once more, about a year later, at an industry conference. He was standing alone near the bar. Our eyes met across the room. He looked away first. I felt something unexpected, not triumph, but pity. I thought of Derek, who is now a senior account manager at Sterling and mentors young employees, just as I did for him back in the day. I thought of Maria, who manages our most innovative campaigns with the confidence Marcus tried to suppress. I thought of James, who won 2 industry awards for his creative work. They succeeded because they had someone who believed in them, not someone who threatened them. That was the difference. That was always the difference. You can control people through fear, or you can earn their loyalty through respect. Fear works faster. Respect lasts longer. 2 years later, I'm still at Sterling Communications. The title is now Senior Vice President, another promotion, another step forward. The team we've built includes 9 people who came from Caldwell Partners, plus a dozen more we've hired from across the industry. Patricia Huang is still our client. Meridian just renewed for their 3rd year. Last month, I got a call from a young woman named Priya who works at a different agency. She was going through something similar to what I'd experienced: a hostile manager, escalating retaliation, the feeling of being trapped. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you get out?" I told her what I tell everyone who asks: document everything. Build relationships that exist outside your current job. Know your rights, your contracts, the policies that protect you. And when the time comes to leave, leave with your head held high. and your evidence folder backed up in 3 different places. But most importantly, I told her, remember that your value doesn't depend on what one toxic boss thinks of you. The clients who followed me didn't do it because I asked them to. They did it because they knew my value. The colleagues who left didn't do it because I recruited them. They did it because they knew their own value. Toxic bosses succeed because they make you forget your own worth. Don't let that happen. She thanked me. I gave her my email in case she needed anything else. I recognized the fear in her voice. I'd felt it too once. A week later, she sent me a message. She'd submitted her resignation. She had a new job lined up, better pay, better culture, and she'd taken 2 accounts with her, accounts whose clients had specifically requested to follow her. Another survivor. Another story of accountability. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if things could have gone differently. If Marcus had seen me as an asset instead of a threat. If he'd learned to manage through respect instead of fear. But I remember the people he pushed out before me. What he did to me wasn't personal. He applied the same pattern of behavior to me, but this time it didn't work. Some people can only learn consequences the hard way. Marcus learned. The last I heard, he was consulting, independent work, project-based, no direct reports. The kind of arrangement you end up with when your reputation precedes you in all the wrong ways. Either way, it's simply not my problem anymore. So what did I learn from all of this? 4 things. First, document everything. I cannot stress this enough. If you're working in a hostile environment, your memory is not enough. Dates, times, witnesses, exact quotes, write it all down and keep copies somewhere they can't be deleted. Second, your relationships are your real asset. Marcus thought he could separate me from my clients by reassigning accounts. He didn't understand that client relationships aren't about org charts, they're about trust. You can't transfer trust with a memo. Third, know your contracts. I didn't have a non-compete because I'd never signed one. That wasn't an accident. I'd reviewed every document before I signed it 7 years earlier. That one piece of due diligence is what allowed me to take my career with me when I left. Fourth, accountability isn't revenge. Revenge is about making someone suffer. Accountability is about ensuring that actions have consequences. I didn't set out to destroy Marcus. I set out to protect myself, build something better, and let the truth speak for itself. The destruction was a side effect of his own choices catching up with him. The workplace can be brutal. Have you experienced this too? Toxic managers exist at every level, and systems designed to protect employees often protect the people in power instead. But documentation creates records, relationships create options, and when talented people start walking out the door, even the most insulated executives have to answer for it. Marcus called me worthless in front of 34 people. 62% of his revenue followed me out the door. That's not revenge. That's accountability. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full orange file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.